IsoDraw CADprocess webinar. Nice to see so many of you interested in the capabilities of IsoDraw. So this morning Joe is going to run through three main focus areas of IsoDraw. First of all, we will look at how IsoDraw makes it easy for you to draw your technical illustrations directly from scratch. Secondly, then we'll review how easy IsoDraw makes it for you to leverage 2D data and some of the advanced tools in IsoDraw. And finally, the highlights, we will be looking at how IsoDraw CADprocess enables you to use your 3D data and maintain a link to the original CAD file. So now I'm going to pass over to Joe for the technical illustration. Enjoy.
Good morning, everyone. So what we're going to look at, as Luke's just run through the agenda, IsoDraw is a technical illustration tool used for technical documentation, used to create the images used within the technical documentation. So the first thing that you're going to notice from the IsoDraw software, so I've opened up IsoDraw, this is IsoDraw CADprocess 7.3. In here you can see that we have a series of drawing tools down the left hand side. We've got some additional menus that you can hide and show, and during the course of the demonstration I'll be hiding and showing some of these windows. And the first thing that you're going to notice that becomes immediately obvious is the background, the grid background that you have across the back of the screen. So this grid background makes it really nice and simple and really easy for you to draw, because as you can see, as I draw a line, my line is instantaneously snapping to that grid. You've also got dimension on the line, so you can see that as I'm drawing the line I can tell how long it's going to be, which means that it's really, really easy for me to quickly draw things in perspective view, so I can draw objects in perspective straight away. Now the grid that you've got on the background can be changed, so you can change the angle of that grid to whatever angle suits you, meaning that when you're drawing things, whatever angle that you like your perspective objects in, they will be drawn to that angle as and how you want them, because your sketching items will snap to that grid. Okay, so what we're now going to do is show you some more of the additional functions. So there's some nice little tools within IsoDraw that enable you to draw your objects. If I zoom in on here a little bit, we can draw a simple bolt, whereby we've got instantaneous threads that we can have on our model, so you can demonstrate the principles here. We've also got polygon tool, so your polygon tool will draw a shape of whatever size that you prefer, so you can have however many sided shape that you like with this. And we've got some nice intelligent tools for removing lines, so IsoDraw will understand the lines that it needs to remove when selecting the line. So all you do is select the line and hit a keyboard shortcut, which is already programmed into the software, and it will figure out which of the lines it needs to remove. So for example, you select the back line and hit the F6 key, it will automatically understand that it needs to remove that back line. Now as you can see, I've drawn a bolt there fairly quickly and simply and easily, and if I was to go to the window tab, I can preview that to show you what it's going to look like when we export this illustration. So you can see it automatically comes in with the thick and thin lines, and all of this can be set up. You can set up your thick and thin lines already before you start working. Now some of you may be sitting there thinking, yes, okay, it's nice that I can draw tools such as bolts and nuts and so on and so forth, but it's not really an effective use of your time to sit there drawing nuts and bolts. So the developers of IsoDraw understand that, so we also have a built-in library that's built into the system. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw the opposite thread this time, so we'll draw an inner thread rather than an external thread. And in here we're going to then specify on the library. So we're going to open up our library, and in our library you can see that there are over 2,500 parts in this library, all predefined. So in here we can select bolts, and there are some predefined bolts in here. These are some predefined shapes, so you've got some hexagon nuts. We've got some really nice additional tools in here as well, such as some Allen keys, or they even include hands as well. So there is a library of hands. Now, these are notoriously difficult for people to draw or sketch freehand, so you can see that we have some of these already shown. which means that when you're importing your objects from the library, so this time we'll go back up and we'll find a hexagon nut, or a hexagon bolt, and we'll select the hexagon bolt, something from the library. Now when I click the insert button here, what's going to happen is IsoDraw automatically puts that bolt into the sketch, puts it in perspective automatically, and scales it to whatever I had selected. So if I now just select my bolt, and I can drag that away, that's now still in perspective, the threads are the same size, and it's scaled my sketch automatically for me. So using that capability, you can see that producing your technical illustrations, and when you're using things from the library, that's going to be much quicker and much easier for you to do. Okay. So, next thing that we're going to have a look at is how we can leverage 2D drawing, 2D data. So a lot of the customers that we speak to have 2D information, 2D drawing data that they need to utilize and they need to use. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to open up an image file. So a lot of our customers will receive information like this. So you can see it's placed our image file with the profile onto our perspective view. It hasn't placed it in perspective view just yet, so we have some nice advanced tools. If we wanted to extrude something like this, you'd be having to draw it out, and it's a waste of your time to draw that if you already have the 2D profile. So we can drag a box around it, and we can go to one of our advanced tools called the extrusion tool, and what by selecting the extrusion tool does is it takes whatever I had selected, it then places it automatically onto my grid in my perspective, and then gives me these two little drag handles that enable me to drag this so that I can sort of position my sketch where I want it. And when I'm finished and I've got the length to the length that I want, I also have an option to close the cut. So you can see by ticking the close cut option what that's doing here. I could close the cut off, I could say OK, and then I've generated my projection nice and quick, and that's then generated in my drawing for me to reference, for me to add dimensions to, for me to work with, for me to add colour on. So all of that's available with there. One of the additional tools as well is not only do people have to do extruded protrusions, but they also have to do revolved shapes as well. So there is also a tool within IsoDraw for this as well. So if I was to open up my other image file, what you've got here is you have your cross-sectional profile of what we have inside here, so you can see where the cross-section has been taken from. And this time if I drag a box around it, now all I've got here on screen is just a circle, a simple circle that's been drawn using the circle tool that I demonstrated earlier on. And we also have a revolve tool. So if I click on my revolve tool from my little toolbar, and these toolbars you can move around, you can position them in the window wherever you like. And then I get a little hand on my mouse. So I'm going to take my hand and I'm going to drag this and I'm going to drop it onto my circle. So when I drop it onto my circle, IsoDraw realizes that I want to revolve this shape. I then get my little drag handles to be able to revolve that round to a specified angle that I choose. So again, when I'm finished positioning this roughly where I want, I can finish off my projection or my revolve. I have an additional option to create a complete surface, which will revolve it all the way around if I want to. I can specify in a bit more detail the start angle and the finish angle of this. So if you know that you want this to finish at 245 degrees or at 270 degrees, you can enter that information in here. And we also have an option to close the cuts again. So similar to with the extruded protrusion, I might decide that I want to close the cuts off so it then fills that information in for me. Okay. So you can quickly and easily utilize your 2D drawing, 2D data information that you have to create 3D illustrations. So the next tool that we're going to show you is one of the more advanced tools within IsoDraw. So within IsoDraw, one of the more advanced tools, we're going to advanced tools, is the shaft tool. Now a lot of the time when demonstrating this, people find this really, really simple and easy to use. So if we were to draw a shape, we've got our little edit shaft dialog box up here, and with this we can drag out, and it's just a case of simple drag handles for us to create something within IsoDraw. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a little gear shaft first of all, so we're going to put a key round on here, just position that roughly where we want it, using the drag handles again, just clicking on them and dragging them. I'm going to create another new entity. We might position it something like that. Maybe one more. Get something in perspective. And we'll do a final one. So I'm going to create one more. We'll increase the size of it. And then just drag this out. And also listed in my option is a gear wheel option. So when I select the gear wheel option, it automatically puts all the cogs or all the sections on my gear wheel. I can control how many teeth that has at the sort of the selection of a button. So I could just change it's got 42 teeth, and that they are even placed at an angle if I want. And you can see as I enter various different angles in here, it's going to change. So you can enter minus angles if you want it to go the opposite way. So being able to draw something like that using this technical illustration tool is going to save you a lot of time if you have to sort of work with things like this. Imagine trying to draw this line by line within the software. Having this functionality and this ability is going to speed that up quite substantially. So you've got lots and lots of options there. So from within there now, the next thing that we're going to look at is working with some 3D data. So a lot of our customers that we speak to already they receive the information in the 3D files, and the technical illustrator that has to work with those 3D files finds it difficult because they don't necessarily understand the CAD software that was used to design those files. So what we're going to have a look at now is I'm going to open up another file, and I'm going to open up if I change that to all files, I'm going to select, I'm just going to browse and pick up my file. And when we open it, IsoDraw will recognize that it is an IGES file, so it's a 3D file. It's recognized that it's a 3D file. And upon selecting OK, it then gives me the option to be able to select the structures. Now this is really important because as a technical illustrator, you just need to document areas of the model a bit at a time. So you don't want to have to work with the whole assembly. You could import the whole assembly all together and then spend your time sifting through all the various different parts. Or alternatively, you could work with a little bit more intelligence and select areas of the model that you want to bring in individually and say, I just want to focus on this sub-assembly, just want to focus on these parts. And it enables you to import the information that you want. So this IGES file, IsoDraw has recognized the model tree that was used to create this IGES file. So you can work your way down here, and you can see I can expand to various different sub-levels to see all of the detail, all of the individual parts that are in here. I can choose to ignore individuals, so I can turn them off if I don't want to see them, if I don't want to bring them in. Notice it's intelligent enough to recognize that if I turn off individual components, their sub-assemblies are turned off as well. So once you've filtered through what you want to actually bring into IsoDraw, you can select OK, and it will then position my CAD file into my 2D window. So you can see it hasn't automatically locked it perspective, but it has brought up my 3D toolbar that we can see at the top of the screen here. So using my 3D toolbar, I can place it in various different views. So we've got some predefined views for you that we can use. So I might place it within my 3D grid. And I could then select this, and I could select X, Y, or Z on the keypad and say that I want to move this in the X direction, I want to move it in the Y direction, or I want to move it in the Z direction. So you can use that to position your components. You can pick individual components if you want, so I might pick the front component and say I want to space that out. But if you don't want to waste your time moving the components around yourself, and say for example we just wanted to create an exploded view of this particular assembly, we have an automatic explode tool at the top of the screen. So we can select our automatic explode tool, and it will ask me which axis I would like to explode this assembly on. So obviously in this case I'm going to explode this along the x-axis, and then we can specify whether it just explodes in one direction, so positive or negative, or whether it explodes in both directions. So upon selecting all of my assembly, and so I want to explode that in both directions on the x-axis, it will then space out my components completely, nice and simple, nice and easy for me. I could then, if I want to, do additional things that wouldn't necessarily make sense to a CAD engineer. So a CAD engineer who's positioning this might have to have everything in a specific place for a specific reason. When you're creating technical documentations, that's not always the case. You might need to do something that is a little bit out of the ordinary for a CAD engineer, such as move a component around or just scale an individual component. So I can scale individual components and maybe move them out a little bit more, so I could move them out. And you can sort of take your time to position these and move your components around, position them where you want. When you're happy with all of your components positioned where you want them, you can click on the little camera icon at the top of the screen, and this will then place those into our technical illustration. Okay, so they're placed into our technical illustration. You could then go through and add some callouts onto your model. So you might add some callouts like so. So you can work through this and you can position these. Again, these will snap to the grid that we've got in the background. So you might position your callouts on your model to make it nice and tidy and easy for someone to understand. But the speed comes with this by the fact that we're using our 3D CAD data. So we've utilised our 3D CAD data within this system. In addition to that, if you then want to take 3D CAD data that has a change made to it, IsoDraw enables you to work with that as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create another new file, and we're going to go place and assembly. So in here I have an IGES file, and we're going to place our IGES file. And again, it recognises that it's an IGES file, but it has some assemblies. Do we want to select those assemblies and filter out the information? It then gives us the structure of this, so you can see that this is a fairly substantial part. There's quite a few components in this, and we can load that in, and IsoDraw is quite happy to load that in. So you can see that the amount of components in the assembly, obviously the larger the assembly file, the longer that IsoDraw will take to import it, because there's a lot of information it has to interpret. But even this quite substantial file is quite happy to import. And you could then select it, place it in your isometric view, say that you want to move it relative to the X, Y, or Z component. You might then pick a component and move it out. You might then zoom in a little bit, and if I just change the orientation or change the viewing options, so you've got some viewing options up here, whether you view it with hidden line removal, whether you view it in wireframe, whether you view it in rendering or smooth rendering, which puts a little reflection on it. This is just for the purposes of while you're working on the CAD illustration. If I select a component, we've got some additional tools up here in the 3D toolbar, such as the little lasso eraser. So what we can do with this is we can just draw a box or draw around an area of our model that we would like to remove, so we can see a little cutout into the 3D model. Okay. So again, you could take your time positioning your components. As you've seen how easy it is to move things within the different directions. You could move all your components out if you wanted to, move them in different directions, get your exploded view as and how you wanted it, either by using the explode tool that you have at the top of the screen or by positioning them individually. And then we're going to convert this into our 2D illustration. So we're going to convert it into our 2D illustration. You can see that that's now in our 2D illustration. You might then again place your callouts on it, position them where you want them, and now we're going to simulate what happens normally in the design process, where the technical illustrator has a file, he's been working on the file, he's done all his technical documentation, he's created all the images using IsoDraw in this case, and then the engineer decides that he's going to make a change to the CAD file, and he's going to add something to the model or change the CAD model. So what we have up here is just a little batch script that I've prepared. So to save time, rather than actually opening up the CAD system, we have a little batch script that we have, and you'll see by me running the second batch script here that the file size for the file that we're using is going to increase. So if I run the batch script, you can see that the file size has increased from 13301 to 13495. And if I then select IsoDraw, what it does, it doesn't load up straight away because it's taken into consideration there is a CAD change, and it then automatically realizes that the CAD file has changed. And when I've back in IsoDraw, you can see that this plate has been added in here. So what that enables me to do, I can go back into our 3D transformation tool and reposition the component. So I might want to move this in the Y direction, position this out, and again, you could take your time to space these out, but being able to leverage the fact that a design change has happened during the technical illustration process means that the technical illustrator can start all his illustrations far earlier in the process, because he hasn't got to wait for the engineer to finish the completed file. Okay, so Just to summarise, we've shown you the tools that IsoDraw has in terms of generating 2D illustrations. So if you need to sketch things from scratch, because I know a lot of a lot of technical illustrations are still drawn from scratch. We've also shown you some tools to leverage your 2D data. And finally, we showed you how you can use IsoDraw CADprocess if you have a design change in the design and still have your technical documentation updated and linked together. Okay? So, thank you for joining us this afternoon, or this morning, sorry. Is there anything else you'd like to summarise, Luke?
No, that's all. If you need any more information, please feel free to get in touch via the website or the phone, or just drop us an email. And thank you all for joining, and thank you, Joe.